Hey guys, Darren Carr here, Coach of Wise Pods, and welcome back to another episode of the AFL Fantasy 2025 preseason. On today's episode, I thought it would be a good time to provide you guys with a bit of a team update to show you where my team currently sits. I've done a fair bit of research over the last 2.5 months since the game's sort of come out. Since we're really starting to see bits and bobs about the preseason content coming back. So I've done a fair bit of research, over 250 player reviews, throughout the club preview series that I did, where I reviewed every single club, and also, collating that into player position summaries as well. So I've done a lot of research, and I just wanted to really update you guys on where my team currently sits with all the relevant information. So let's build this team together, and hopefully you guys enjoy. So we are here on the AFL Fantasy website, and let's just get stuck into building this team. The way I sort of like to build my team straight off the bat is to put the locks in. So probably the easiest way to do that for me is to go into teams selected by percentage. Even though I don't look at that too much, it's just the easiest way to find the most popular guys. So the guys that I consider locks, you can't go past the three forwards, the ex-doggies there. I will slot them straight in to the side. Doesn't really matter what position they're in currently. I'll switch that around a little bit later. In terms of the midfield, you can't go past the Clayton Oliver. I just think he is an absolute lock. Back in the midfield now that he's returned from injury. I probably should have touched on these three. Obviously, the ex-doggies are really, really popular, and I'm sure you guys have heard plenty about them. So I just think they're in for a massive year, very unders in terms of what they're going to do, going to much better roles that they have had in the last couple of years. So I think they're locking everyone's side, and that reflects in their percentage quite literally. So the other couple ones I consider locks is also Callum Mills. With recent news, there was a bit of skepticism about what his role was going to be at Sydney this year after, only managing 6 games last year. But there has been confirmed that he's going to be thrown back into the midfield as a full-time midfielder that may play little bits here and there elsewhere, but predominantly going to be a midfielder. So we've seen him be a 110 guy previously in this role. So he's just an absolute lock in my side currently. The other one that I also have a lock, which I think is pretty common as well, is Jaden Shaw. I just don't see him leaving my side at any point. He's been on my side the entire preseason. Priced at that 80, has always been a 90 to 95 sort of guy previously, so he's already 10, 15 points unders. Plus, with Richmond being a bit worse and with Daniel Rioli leaving that side, I just think he's an absolute lock back there, and I can at least see him going up 10 to 15 points. That sort of finishes it in terms of what my locks are. So 6 players that have been on my side probably since day one and have not left my side. There have been a few others that have been in and out, like a Philippou that was in my side round one, since day one, but obviously with his injury news, he's going to be missing the big period of the preseason. He has unfortunately moved out of there. But I think the next best part is going into the rookies. So at this stage now, we've sort of got a pretty good idea of what rookies are going to play round one. We're not 100% confirmed, but you can see what role they're playing, and you're hearing the news that they're most likely going to get a pretty early debate, and most likely going to be round one. So I think the easiest ones to go with is probably a Jagger Smith. He's playing a mostly midfield time role at Carlton and playing a little bit of a half forward role, so I just think he's a lock to play around one. Draper's also probably another one that is getting a huge amount of time in the CBAs at Adelaide. Come on, move please. I might need to refresh this because it's a bit slow. So I think he's a lock to play early. He's just a big body for such a young guy, so I think they'll put a lot of time in him this year and he'll get early games in round one. I'll skip over Levi Ashcroft, and that's probably a bit of a controversial one because he is, 54% owned currently, and he is such a ball magnet when it comes to fantasy scores. But I just think he has the written all over him at this point in time. You know, the news that has come out is that he's most likely going to play a half forward role. But he's not guaranteed to play round one at this point in time, so I have left him out of my side currently, but that can obviously change to any. I can easily switch him out quite easily between all these sort of players if one was not to get up. Lawler is probably one I'm definitely locking in. Probably not going to be the best fantasy scorer, but probably has one of the better roles. Should have a pretty dominant midfield CBA role at Richmond, alongside the likes of Taranto and Hopper, and then maybe a Prestige there as well. So I'm locking him in on my bench a little bit. Where are we now? Harry Boyd is probably one I should just lock on my bench. We've obviously heard a lot about him being recruited from St Kilda and all the issues that Marshall's sort of going through. Even though Marshall's probably going to play round one, there's obviously been a lot of rumours that he is looking to play a little bit more forward. And currently it looks like Harry Boyd is probably that number one ruckman that may come in to support and do that chopping out with Rowan Marshall forward a little bit. So pretty bullish on him, but I'm not bullish enough that I would start him at R2. Marshall would have to be out for an extended period of time for me to go with a Boyd at R2, and even then that would be pretty skeptical in my eyes. But at R3, I'm looking at going 30 green dots the best I can to start the season. So if he's playing, then he absolutely is a lock at my R3 there. Moving down the list, moving down on past quite a few players. Leak in the defense, I've locked him in there. I'm pretty sure he's going to get quite a few games early on. He was a high draftee last year, obviously injury riddled all last season and didn't get a game, so I'm expecting him to make his debut round one. He's a good fantasy scorer, and locking him away at 230k as a defender, probably going to get a fair bit of wing time, but also some CBA usage is what's been coming out. I'm a bit skeptical on the CBA usage, with their midfield mix with the likes of Green, Keneally maybe in there. Callahan's expected to go in there a fair bit as well. Then you throw the likes of Josh Kelly and a few others that can run through there. So not 100% sure that he will be in the midfield, but as a defender that's playing a wing role, I can see him being quite easily a 60. So I like him at that price better than a few others that I have left out of the side a little bit. Toby Travaglia, I can't really pronounce it, but he does slot onto my field currently. I'm not super confident that he'll play round one, but with the likes of Howard being injured, Battle moving out of that side, going to Hawks, there are spots available. It's just whether they trust a Travaglia to be that guy that can just instantly come into the side. He is a high draft pick. I think he was draft pick number 7 or something like that. So he's more of that medium sort of defender, so could play a bit of a role. So I don't mind him there. Barlin, I did completely skip over about Barlin somehow. He was at the top of the list, so he does slot onto my defense as well. For all main reasons that he's a big body defender, midfielder, mainly a midfielder, but he's going to be playing a defensive role at West Coast, so I think he's just a lock there. More expensive in 295k, but paying up for that on the defensive line I'm happy with. Going to get good games. I guess I can throw Hewitt as a rookie. He didn't play too many games last season, but he will be my F6 this season. Now, you'll notice I haven't put Kaku in my side currently. I'm just not super confident that he is going to score very well. Playing for Essendon. Essendon are going to be closer to the bottom of the ladder this year, or potentially pushing between that sort of 12 and 16 sort of range. I don't see them getting much higher than that. So I just don't know how much opportunity he's going to have. While he may play a lot of games, I just probably have a few others that are ahead of him in terms of fantasy potential. And one of those is Daniel Curtin at a little bit of a cheaper price. He just slots into my defense line there. I just think he's going to play a pretty dominant half forward role, but that may have a little bit of wing time at Crows. So I think with his bigger body, bigger frame, he's ready for the AFL. He can probably be, anywhere between a 60 and 70 for us. So I like him there. A few others that I have, Harvey Langford. I'm really bullish on what he can do. He's probably going to play a 50-50 role, in the CBAs and on the wing for Melbourne. Really good junior numbers and draftee numbers, so I'm really bullish on what he could do, and he could potentially slot on field for me if he shows that he has the potential in the practice match simulations. Where else was I? Who was the last one? I'll have to look this one up because he's not that big a price. But Connor Stone does sneak into my forward bench. Recent news has been coming out that he has sort of replaced that Harry Perriman role. I've been speaking quite highly about that. The GWS are really looking for that small defender, with a lot of others moving out of that side. So I was pretty bullish on one of these players going to get it. A lot of them are suspended to start of the season, so it really narrowed the list. So Harry Stone has been one that I've been looking at quite for a little while, but just wasn't super confident what his output would be. But being that role, being that sort of 6th, 7th defender as on the halfback, I think he could be quite a decent fantasy scorer for us at a baseman's price, so it's a bit of a lower risk and probably has more of an upside to the likes of a Joe Berry or a Kaku and a few of the other guys there. So I'm backing him in at a cheaper price, so I like that. And I think the final one I had on here was Finn O'Sullivan. Why can't I find him? Finn O'Sullivan is 16% at the moment. He has dropped a fair bit lower than what he probably has been previously, but I'm really bullish on him at the start of the season. I think he is locked to be in there for round one. He's going to play predominantly a wing, halfback, and half forward role, so really just spanning a long way around that wing. It could mean his scores are going to be very fluctuant, but I think he's got some good fantasy potential, and on the wing we have seen some decent guys score very well there. So I like what he can bring. Maybe not on the field, but definitely one I'm looking at that higher price. So that sort of does it for my rookies, and you can see the sort of structure that I'm going for already. Have reduced the amount of rookies that I have in my midfield, but that's just mainly due to the rookies that are available at this point in time that I am expecting to play. Obviously, if Will Ashcroft gets named round one, then he probably just comes into my side quite simply and goes on the field, and then I'll do a bit of a restructure in terms of remove another mid price or and then maybe pay up for a more premium here and there. So there's definitely a few different structures I'm playing with, because when it comes to round one, I don't want to be in panic mode that this player was named. Okay, how do I restructure my team overnight? I really want to be prepared for all scenarios. So this is probably my worst case scenario with the rookies that I've named. I think most of these guys are going to be a lock to play. A few players can switch and change here. If Harvey Langford doesn't play, then there'll be a few others that I can just switch in that maybe a cheaper price. A Langford comes in. Lever comes in. Or there's a few others that I like as well. So this is where I'm at currently with my rookies. Probably not too different to a lot of other teams. I think it's pretty common along the fantasy community currently. It gets interesting where we get to the other guys. And I guess I should start in the defensive line. And I guess the first pick is a little bit less known. Not less known, sorry, but less ownership. A lot of people have gone with, a Sheasel, and I have played around with paying up for him, being that captain option, but I have ultimately moved away from that currently. Just going with a bit of a cheaper guy. It was Sinclair for the longest time. He had been on my side all preseason, but with the news that he has a hamstring injury and he's going to miss the practice matches, that pretty much just rules him out for me. I'm paying up for someone that's 102, over 100, that is well over $1 million. I really want them to have a full preseason, and having a hamstring entering round one just doesn't sit too well with me. So he has left my side, but that does open the door for Awangani Malira, who currently sits at my D1. Now I haven't spoken a huge amount of him for probably a good reason, because with Sinclair going in the half back line, where I expect him to play for majority of the season, with their midfield being a lot more pronounced now, with the likes of Jack McRae and Philippi entering there, with obviously a Windhager in there as well. I just think Sinclair's going to be on the halfback a lot more, and that does lower Wanganeen-Malura's output just slightly, probably from like a 98, which is what he averaged for the season, probably to like a 92-ish is from what the stats that showed me. But with Philippou out for, I think 6 to 8 weeks to start the season, I think Wanganeen-Malura can get off to an absolute flyer. Being that main guy back there, even though Sinclair may play to start the season, I think he'll play a little bit more in the midfield, probably being that third or fourth midfielder behind the likes of Steele, McRae, and then it'll probably be a mixture of Windhager and maybe a Riley Garcia here and there. So I just think Wanganeen-Malura can get off to an absolute flyer. He's got a pretty good fixture to start the season as well. No early bye, which is great. Could be a potential captain option, but I'd have to be pretty bullish on what he can. Probably more of a VC option early on, which does suit, round 2 to 4 for me. So could definitely put on a few VCs, against the Cats. They give up a lot of points, and Tigers, obviously, the number one points conceding team. So definitely like that a lot. So he sits at my F1 currently at that $1 million price, priced at 98. I think he can probably put, 7 points on that and really push that top 6 to start the season. After that, then we'll have to sort of evaluate where he sort of sits with the likes of Sinclair moving back into that role with Philippou back in the side. Following up from that is probably another less known name, but that is Harry Perryman, obviously moving from GWS to Collingwood. Again, probably a player that a lot of people are just not looking at because of the early buy being round 3, a bit tricky there. But I'm really liking what he's doing in this preseason so far. He's playing a predominantly midfield role, defensive midfield role, alongside the likes of Dacos and, Pendlebury. So I think he's going to spend a lot of time in there this year, and I think that presents a lot of upside. I think he can easily push a 90, if not closer to a 95 in that role. We've seen what Cripps was able to do in that defensive midfield role, averaging, easily over 100 for a big period of last year. Not saying that they're a like-for-like player, but Perryman definitely has that sort of upside and being able to be a pretty good fantasy scorer for us. So I really like what he can do, being able to push that 20 points that I'm really looking for to make him a worthwhile average. Yes, the early buy isn't the greatest, but I think I have plenty of cover to still have my 22 players on field with rookies, and I still think I'll have a pretty good amount of non-rookies scoring throughout those rounds to really come home strong probably after the buy. So I'm pretty bullish on what he can do. Prime average of 26. The run isn't the greatest when it comes to the midfield run, but I'm still happy paying up when he's that cheap. When I'm not looking too heavily on the run when it comes to these cheaper mid-price sort of guys. So they do go GWS round 0, so we will get to have a good look at him in round 0. They do start with Port Adelaide to start off, which is a very hard team. Western Bulldogs, and they do go on the bye. Then they go Carlton, Sydney, Brisbane. So it is a pretty tough run, but I'm still pretty bullish on what he can do in that role, and particularly with those sort of games, being that defensive midfielder, it sort of works in his favor a little bit because they will be relying on him a little bit more to being that tackle guy. So I think it really may work in his favor. So for that reason, he is in my side currently, down at 4.8% owned currently. And this one again, probably another a little bit lessly owned player, but I think it will get up there quite quickly towards the start of the season, and that is Ari Shawmaker at St Kilda, 494k, second-year player, only played the 4 games in his career, but I just think he's got an absolute position in that halfback role for Saints. With Howard out, Battle that's obviously moved on, very similar reasons to Toby Travaglia, but at a bit more of a premium price, 494k, like I said. Good run to start the season, and I just think he has a lot of upside. Priced at 48, I think he can go, 70, if not closer to 80. He's an elite scorer in the VFL, and he's showing that in his draft year as well. So I'm pretty confident what he can do, and there's a lot of vacant points there with Battle moving out, and like I said, Howard for the first period of the season. So I like what he can do, and I've locked him in my defensive line currently. Moving into the midfield, and there's been a lot of speculation about who your M1 can be. A lot of people are going with the likes of, I'm not even going to show it here, but Bontempelli is pretty high up there. Brayshaw, Rosie, all these sort of guys. I have played with a lot of them in my team. You know, Brayshaw spent a lot of time in there. Rosie has as well, and then Bontempelli. But I all see downsides to their game. You know, Bontempelli may play a lot more forward. You know, they have a lot of guys that can run through that midfield. So I'm not super confident that he will improve this year. Rosie with the likes of JHF spending a bit more time in the midfield potentially this year. That means he could spend a bit more time forward. Yes, there is some built-in value with his injured games from last year, but I don't think it's going to be enough to really push him into that category of being a top 8 midfielder. So it's probably not enough in that sense. And obviously with the concerns of him moving forward, it could potentially even drop his average. So it's enough to scare me off at this point, but they do have a really good run. And Brayshaw has probably spent the most time in my side out of the three of them, but I'm really concerned about the Fremantle game style being a bit that quicker game style where we have seen a pretty drastic reduction in kicks, and they're really relying a lot more on handball, so it means less plus sixes. So I just see that again improving this year with a much more strength inside. So I'm a little bit less on him going, you know, back to those 110 ways which we've seen over the last couple of years. So for that reason, I haven't selected him in my side currently at this point. Again, this is all subject to what happens in the preseason games. They could absolutely kill it and they could convince me. So I don't take much to convince at this point in time. But the F1, the M1 option I have gone with so far is Tom Green. There's no debate on what his role is going to be. It's clearly his midfield to go, you know, at GWS. So he's the number 1 mid in there every single week. He is by and far undervalued compared to what he has done previously, where he's been a 110 guy. He just had a lot of injuries last year. Yes, there are flags that he has the early bye round 2, which isn't great, but he also has a pretty decent run to start the season, which I'm also pretty bullish. So I think he can start really well. You know, starting with Collingwood to start the season is pretty nice. It's a light green matchup, so he could go really well in that matchup. Then he starts with Melbourne, so pretty good at captain option to start the season if I was to go there. And then he has West Coast, St Kilda, Adelaide, and even Geelong towards the back end of that first start of the season. So, and even Richmond in there. So there are a really good couple matchups in there. So pretty bullish on what he can do, and I think he's just a lock to be a top 8 midfielder, even pushing top 4. You know, behind the likes of a Merritt and maybe even a Brayshaw and a Bontempelli, sort of the stuff like that. So at a much cheaper price than those guys, I'm locking him at my M1. Now it gets into the mid prices, so I have locked in Clayton Oliver as my underpriced premium at that M2 spot. I just think I'm not looking at him as a mid price anymore. I'm just looking at him as an underpriced premium, because we all know he's a premium. He is just such a cheap price that it does seem like he's a bit of a mid-pricer option, and it can make you a little bit scared off with him. But I'm looking at him in terms of what he's able to do, not the price that he's at currently. And for that reason, I have gone with the likes of Will Day at this next point of in my M3. Now, he hasn't spent a huge amount of my time in my side. It has been a lot of other players. You know, I've been pretty hot on a Canelio all preseason, and a Doherty's also another one that has spent a lot of time on my side. But with the likes of Canelio not actually playing in match simulations at the moment, he's still managing his injury. So for those sort of reasons, he's out of my side currently. It would take Canelio both practice matches to play both practice matches to come back on my side. I'm still pretty bullish on what he could do. And the same with Doherty. He's mainly playing this wing role, which I do still think he's a bit of value in that he's priced at and what he could do on the wing, but just not 100%. It's not probably enough for me to pick him over the likes of a Will Day, who is by far 21 points undervalued from what he was able to do last year, where he was a 95 guy. Now, I'm not expecting him to go back to those 95 ways, because I think I've flagged plenty of times that he relied quite heavily on marks when he was doing that 95, and the Hawks were a lot worse back then, so he was able to get those sort of cheap possessions. Now that they're going to be a bit more of a competitor for the flag or for our finals, it means their game style was a bit different, and it means that the ball probably won't be chipped around as much as what it has been. And you know that they really rely pretty heavily on that slingshot defensive. So he'd have to be in that transition a fair bit to get those points. So while I think he has a lot of upside, I still think I put a ceiling on him being a 90 guy, which I think is enough at his price to be quite decent. The run to start the season isn't the greatest, and the round 4 bye obviously isn't ideal, but he is the only one I currently have on the round 4 bye, so I'm not really counting that into consideration too much, and does provide a looping option for me in that round, which is something I've been looking at because I am starting 30 green dots to start the season as long as the league allows me. So I really like what Will Day can do. Still very young at 23. The other flag I do want to mention is that he potentially becomes a bit of a tag option this year. You know, probably being that best midfielder for them. He's obviously very talented and could potentially be anything if he can get his body right and play a consistent 22 games this season, or 23 games, should I say. So I'm locking him in there, but that could definitely change. The next person I don't think comes as too much a surprise, and that is a guy that a lot of people are mentioning. It's not actually that highly owned at the moment, but that is Hollins. Now, I just think he is such a low price for what he is potentially going to do in that halfback role. Now, this play, he could easily be a Doherty. You know, I'm potentially going to start one of the Freo boys, whether that's a Doherty or a Hollins or even a Chera that I've looked at, but I'm less bullish on Chera just because of the injury concerns. You know, he has gone over to Doha to try and overcome those issues, but I haven't really heard too much about him this preseason and about match simulations to give me any confidence to pick him at a stage, so I have moved away from him, but I will be starting one of these Colton boys. So at this point, I'm paying up for the cheaper one, that is Hollins, because he seems like he's the most favoured to be in that role. So at that 640k, priced at 62, I think he can easily push, 85, 90. Even though we haven't seen any evidence of that, I just think in a much better role, moving, what's his name? Newman out of there, obviously with his Achilles injury. There's just a lot of points back there, and I just think there is absolutely a world that he goes, 90 to 100. So he's just going to be that Nick Martin for us, and I think I'm just going to lock him in early days. He is 7% owned. I do think that will increase as we see more and more of this, more and more evidence that he's going to be playing that role and what he's capable of being off the halfback. So I'm locking him at my M4 currently. And then the last mid-price that I have in my team comes at no surprise, and that is James Peatling, another one that I have probably could have been included in my locks, honestly. He's been part of my team all preseason, and I'm just an absolute big fan of what he's going to do. Playing a predominantly midfield CBA role at Adelaide, alongside the likes of Dawson, Dawson, Crouch, and probably a Saligo and a Draper, the new draftee, which, Draper's in here as well. So I'm just really bullish on what he can do. Priced at 62, I think he easily goes 85 to 90. He's shown that he was able to go 88 at GWS, and that was in a not so hot, very fluctuating role where he sometimes spent a little bit more time forward. I think he's going to play a bit more CBAs here, so I think he could even push closer to that 90, if not push over 90. So pretty happy with him there. Priced at that 634 price tag. Really good run to start the season as well. I expect him to probably increase in ownership to start the season. Sorry, I did have one more mid-price, and this one is probably a bit more speculative, one I'm really calling on as it comes, and that is probably a little bit weird, but that is Isaac Cumming. Priced at 575k, sorry, 56 price tag. Only played the 4 games last season, 12% owned currently. He is undoubtedly underpriced. It's just really what role he's going to play. And from all match reports, he is playing a mostly wing role and sort of floating halfback here and there. So that sort of does limit my upside for what he could do in my eyes. Like, I see him on the wing probably a 70 to 75 average player, whereas if he was on the halfback, I could probably see him being an 80 to 85. So I do think it drops him down that sort of 10 points there. So that does make him less than 20 points of value currently in my eyes. So I am less positive on this pick, but currently, as I see it, he's the one that I can slot in my team. I will sort of shuffle it here and there if it proves me right that he's not going to have the best role. So that is the midfield done, and now we're going to move into the ruck line, which gets a lot of time this year because it is pretty difficult so far this season, and for that reason, I've gone pretty simple. I've just slapped Cherry in there, banking that he's going to be R1 for the entire year. I understand, and did flag that he has some pretty tough matchups to start the season. English is a pretty good one. I'll definitely captain him in that matchup. But Max Gorn, Riley O'Brien, Brody Grundy, Witts, and even the likes of Pitnet and De Koning can be pretty tight. And then he also has the double ruck in Sam Draper and Todd Goldstein, even Oscar McInerney. So he does have a pretty tough run to start the season, and it probably means he will be a bit cheaper. But for simplicity and for the way I'm looking at it, I'm looking at long term. Yes, people may be able to get him a bit cheaper, but they're also having to use a trade to get him in at some stage, and it's not always going to be the easiest time to get him because he is going to be quite highly owned. I would be surprised if he drops below $1 million this year. He is just a ruck pig at this end of the day. He knows how to just rack it up. While he may not average this 114 again, I still expect him to be around this 110 average, just with the way that he plays and the thirst that he has for the ball. So I'm locking him in there as a good captain option. Looking at my side currently, he's by far the best captain option I have. I could trust the Tom Green, and Wanganeen Malura is also there. Noliver does have a bit of a sneaky option as a captain option here and there, but not currently. So that's probably most people's R1s. They're probably not too creative in the end of the day, but he has been in my side pretty much all preseason. 55% owned, not taking too much into account, but he is there and it could follow the numbers a little bit. But so the second ruckman I have has fluctuated a fair bit. I started back when I first released my team, which I will show again just to do a bit of a comparison. But I did have Rowan Marshall, but with his injury, with the bruised pelvis, I believe it is, he's doubtful for round one, but they have said he's probably going to be likely for round one. But that the flag is that he's spending more time forward, which means more than likely he won't average this 117 again. So for that reason, I'm not looking at starting him at that max price, and I have gone down to the next best, which is Max Gorn. Now, not many people have him at R2 at this point in time. He's at nearly 10% owned. It is slowly increasing as more people are talking about it, because it seems less and less likely that the likes of Tom De Koning is going to get this solo ruck role. It is quite a risky role in the sense that Pitnet is still very much in the side, and Carlton have very much shown that they are happy to throw Pitnet in there at any point in time. So I could easily see De Koning being solo ruck for round one, but when it comes to round two, they may just throw Pitnet in there. They do have Nank to start the season, Lloyd Meek, Tim English, Darcy Cameron. Then you come up against, a Bailey Williams or a Matt Flynn, maybe even both of them. Cherry. Who knows who's going to be racking out the Cats at this point in time, whether it's going to be his brother Sam De Koning, or it's going to be Stanley, or even Blitzarves, who knows, or even a Conway. So he does actually come up against a lot of solo ruck midfielders. Solo ruck opposition, so that could mean that it's probably less likely that it could happen. So he's still very much in my calculations, but it's enough to scare me away that there's been no confirmation from Carlton that this is absolutely what's going to be happening. So for that reason, again, I'm playing for worst case scenario, and in this worst case scenario, I am just going to be paying up for the best two rucks, who both have been able to show that they can go 120 for a long period of time. Cherry did it in the back half of last year. He did 125, and Max Gorn did it in the first half of the year, where he probably went closer to 130, and he was just this absolute lock of a captain option. So I really like both of them, and I really think both of them are going to be, R1 and R2 for the season, with Royal Marshall expected to drop out a little bit. So I'm pretty bullish on just paying up for both of them at this point in time. It has worked for me in the past. Previously, worked paying up for the best 2 Ruckman. Then we move into the forward line. And this is, again, another spot that is a bit tricky to play around with. Obviously, we've got the 3 guys that are pretty much locked into our side and is pretty common across competition. It's really this F1 spot that is really difficult for a lot of people. I've been looking at a range of different guys. If I just go price or average here, whichever one. A lot of people have Horn Francis at the moment at 40%. As much as I say I think he is overpriced at the moment, I still think he will be top 6 forward. So I have played around with him being in my side, and with the likes of Port's early run, I can see the narrative that he could go really well to start the season. There is just a lot of flags for me that he is overpriced with the Rosie injury every now and then, but there's a lot of bullish things as well, that he is looking a lot fitter this preseason. I think he's dropped a bit of weight, but he's also put on a bit of muscle. There is, he's going to play a bit more midfield this year, potentially going to be a full-time midfield in there. I need to see it a little bit more to really confirm that, okay, they've got 4 guys that are potentially going to be full-time midfielders. How are they going to slot them all in? Does Ollie Wines drop out of that midfield a little bit more, which is probably more likely, or does it send a Rosie forward a little bit here and there? So I just need to see a bit more, and if he's going to be a preferred midfielder, then I absolutely could lock it in with everyone else and pay up for it. But I just need to see it currently, because at this point in time, I think he's overpriced. So for that reason, he's not my team currently, but like I said, he is definitely one I'm playing around with. Luke Parker's definitely another one I've looked at. Early part of the season with George Woodley out, I can see the narrative that he's going to go pretty well, but not currently in my side either. Baker spent a pretty good amount of time in my side of recently, and probably one I'll just slot in here now. He is currently my F1. Just with the news that, he's got this halfback role, we have never really seen him in a super fantasy role before. So being that main distributor off halfback for West Coast, I can see a lot of points. Again, the ball's going to be spending a bit of time back there. He could potentially take some kick-ins, even though I think McGovern potentially takes a lot of them, most of them, and then obviously that could benefit Baker in a way that most of the ball probably goes to Baker to get out of the defense 50. So I'm pretty bullish on what Baker can do, even though he is 805k. And there are flags with his injury history here and there. Paying 78 at that price of 78, I think he can push a 90, if not a 95 in this average. So if he can do that, then I think he slots into that top 6 forward as well, or thereabouts, and probably a keeper for us for a long period of time. So for that reason, I have gone with him. I did look at his teammates in Jack Graham, who is a lot further down. I do think he's got a pretty good role as well, obviously playing a majority midfield role, pretty high in CBAs, alongside the likes of Tim Kelly, Harley Reid if he's fit, and a what's his name, Elijah Hewitt, who's probably going to spend 70-30% midfield, if I didn't say that before. So I do think he could push an 80 to an 85 average, could even be closer to a 90 as well. So he has spent a fair bit of time at that lower price. So I probably will start one of these three guys. I just need to see a bit more on who has the more upside. Obviously, Graham at a lower price, he is, I think, 17 points less. No, 13 points less. He has the probably more risk, but has the higher potential, being that he could generate more cash. And if he can push into that close to that sort of 85 and be close enough to Baker, then you're generating more points per dollar. So that's probably the way I'm looking at it a little bit here and there. So there has been a lot of time where both of these two are flicking in and out of my side every single day pretty much. So I do like both of them. I don't really probably need to spend too much time on this next pick, because it is probably a pick that everyone has at this point in time, and has been the common one that we have switched from a Philippou, and that is Riley Sanders. He's up at 30% owned at the moment, and he is absolutely killing it this preseason. So for those sort of reasons, he slots into my forward line. I just think he's going to have a breakout second year. Probably with likes of Tarullo out, I think he's going to be that third or fourth midfielder for them, probably behind the likes of Bontempelli, Liberatore, and Ed Richards. I just think with when Bontempelli spends some time forward, Sanders comes in and plays a predominant role there, and obviously Kennedy is another one that we need to keep an eye on. That will probably play that fourth or fifth midfield role as well. So I think he's going to get a pretty good amount of time in the CBAs, and for those reasons, he will probably push 80, 85. He's got elite junior numbers, and it just has to put your numbers on top of his 64. Even if he plays a bit of a half forward role here and there, like a Jack McRae did, even if he spends a bit of time on the wing, I think he's going to push a lot into the stoppages just because he's that sort of accumulator player. So I think he can easily go closer to that 80, 85 mark. So lock him into your forward line. So that is the team currently. I do have a bit of money left over at the moment. Like I said, Cumming is probably more on the out of my side, so he could easily go out. It's just what I can spend up for at that price range. It's a bit tricky. I would like to have a little bit more to maybe pay out for another premium, but I could potentially squeeze a few more rookies to get that 100k here and there. I could even pay up a little bit more in the defense line. There's a few port boys that we're looking at that I potentially still like. I just need to see a little bit more. A Farrell is one that's been highly spoken about that has dropped a lot in ownership because he has been injured a lot, but I still think he'll be right to go round one and probably gets a bit of a bump when it comes to the preseason games. So don't mind him there. Ryan Burton I've spoken about previously. He's probably a bit more on the outer, but I still just keeping an eye on him. I could go Chera if he definitely looks like he's over his hamstring injuries here and there. There's just so many guys I'm still looking at, and there's no way that this team is locked in for me just yet. There's still so much water to go under the bridge. So I am just going to log this in, and hopefully this is decent enough. Now, I wanted to really quickly compare what my team was at, this time in December. I think it was late December, just before Christmas. So I pulled up the video, and it has changed a fair bit. I paid up for Sheasel and Sinclair, obviously Sinclair being out now with the injuries. I have moved him on. Sheasel, like I said, I have played a lot with him in my side, and again, I could even pay up for him in this side with the money I do have spare. So Wanganeen-Milera could still easily be a Sheasel here and there, but at this point in time, I'm playing that value game a little bit more and going with Wanganeen-Milera. Obviously had Jane Shaw and Mills. I did have Brian Burton in there. Like I said, I'm still pretty keen on him. Kitty Coleman obviously is unlikely to play. Well, I think he's been ruled out for until round 6 or something now. So he's definitely one I'm not looking to start. I didn't have a M1 previously. I really went that mid rookies sort of vibe at the start of the season, just with a lot of rookies that we thought we're going to have so far this season. I'm trying to remember the one that sort of dropped off, and I think that might be Smiley down here. I can't fully remember, or no, it might actually be a no, Smiley's there. Sorry, it'll be a Finn O'Sullivan that's down there. I can't really find a photo of it, so I have only dropped Smiley off just because he does have an injury concern at the moment, and obviously Levi Ashcroft because of the concerns I spoke about before. Ruckline has changed a little bit in terms of I've just gone Marshall to Gorn, so nothing really different, and I have dropped in Harry Boyd as that sort of R3 option. And in terms of the forward line, not a huge amount has changed besides I did get rid of Shea Bolton after the word came out that he's going to be playing predominantly forward now. So I have slotted in Baker there, but like I said, that could be a host of different players. Besides that, most of it has stayed pretty consistent, besides Philippe with his injury. And really, there hasn't been a huge amount of changes, but I think what this more confirms is that we're on the right track when it comes to the start of preseason, but you're still going to refine your structure, and you really got to confirm those roles as it comes to the preseason matches. So now that my list is much more confined, I can really focus on those players when it comes to those matches and not have to watch, over 200 players and try and take that many notes and stuff like that. So I have really got a refined list of what I'm looking at when it comes to those practice matches, which do start very shortly. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Hopefully this gives you a bit of insight on where I am at currently, and hopefully, maybe I've convinced you to start a player that maybe you weren't super confident on, and maybe you were keen on one of these players that I have. A lot of these players are a little bit lower price, a lower owned, then that can deter a few people. But that's not something I'm hugely looking at the start of this time of season. I'm really just looking at the players that I'm bullish on. I think have a lot of upside, and end of the day, if I look at the preseason match and they're not playing the role that I thought, then it's just okay. I'll find another different option. That there's a host of different players that we could change to at this point in time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys next week when we can review some practice matches. Catch you then. Bye.